Welcome, everyone. You'll come in a little bit slowly, but this is the first in our fifth series of webinars from cross-cultural communications. So as we trickle in, please make yourself at home, so to speak. Many of you, perhaps most of you, are at home. This is number one in series 5 of our cross-cultural communications and Blue Horizon free webinars series. And the whole series focuses on tools for interpreters. This particular one is help, we need RSI, now what? When client education and IT fall on the interpreter's shoulders. And this is a subject that we are hearing more and more about, so hopefully will be of value to you. The webinar has been approved for CUs from ATA, CCHI, and RID. We will, for participants who attend live only. For those of you who are new to cross-cultural communications, just briefly, we're the only national training agency for community and medical interpreting, and Blue Horizon is our online training platform. If you are also new to webinars in general, the Q&A, or our webinars, the Q&A feature is where we ask you please to write your questions for the presenters. And if you have just general comments or hi, or where you're coming from, or questions for us, at CCC behind the back channel, if you wish, use chat. Use chat for comments and questions to us at CCC, and Q&A again for questions to presenters. The series will continue. We are still exploring the next one. We would like you to use gallery view. If you're familiar, if you go to the top right-hand corner, if you use gallery view, you'll see both our presenters. There's a third one that I'll mention in a minute, but you can see them both at the same time. I will be personally monitoring the question and answer, and may be answering some of your questions ahead of time. And we will have an hour presentation followed by a half hour roughly of Q&A. I want to thank, before I leave you with in the most incredible capable hands, Catherine Allen, Danielle Mader, and Kathy Kaufman for doing this incredibly needed webinar. Catherine, for those of you who don't know, is one of the leading national figures in our whole field in several areas of interpreting. In fact, I've known her for 17 years. Her last 10, she has been not only co-founder but co-president of Interpret America. And as you may know, there's a special sort of finale presentation for that tomorrow. Catherine, to this day, despite being a huge national and even international figure, is still living in the same desert town in the Sierra Nevada where I first knew her, of 5,000, interpreting in hospitals, schools, community services, even though she also does conference interpreting and everything else you can imagine. Danielle is someone working hard at a very large language company, both as a nationally certified sign language interpreter, American Sign Language, to bring those same standards that exist in the field to spoken language interpreting, a passionate advocate for language access. Our third, not really presenter so much as someone who, besides currently traveling in Chile by car, is kindly participating as a subject matter expert in all of this, and a federally court certified interpreter, and just a veteran conference interpreter. And during the half-hour Q&A, she will be joining us to share her expertise with many of the questions that you have. Without further ado, I'm delighted to hand you over to our wonderful and amazing presenters. Have fun, and I will come back for the Q&A. Everybody enjoy.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. I'm going to see the first test of any webinar is, can we successfully share the screen and with the PowerPoint? So if there's any problems, I'm assuming that you will tell me. So it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for that very generous introduction. We are here to hopefully help support you with your journey through simultaneous interpreting, and we would like to give ourselves a brief introduction. I'm going to let Danielle go first.
Thank you, and thank you again to Marjorie. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Meter. I'm located here in Shakopee, Minnesota. I am a certified American Sign Language interpreter and have been for about 16 years or so, 15 years, and have worked primarily in remote interpreting for a number of folks. And so I work also in healthcare interpreting. I'm a licensed trainer with cross-cultural communications, and language access and equity and standards are where my heart is. So really happy to be here today.
And by the time this webinar is done, you're going to figure out how passionate Danielle is.
Yeah, I talk with my hands a lot too, so that kind of drives home the point.
So we'll see it. And I'm Catherine. Marjorie, you kind of overblow me, I think. But for the purposes of this webinar, we are pushing it mostly because I myself have been on this remote simultaneous interpreting journey outside of a conference settings with a nice, fancy platform, and realized how much you have to do to sort of do the client education. So I am an English Spanish interpreter. I am a trainer. I do a lot of curriculum writing and teaching, but I also do interpret and remotely now in this setting. So hopefully the lessons that we've been learning will be lessons that will be helpful to all of you. And I think we will be presenting together and going back and forth some. And so I'm controlling the PowerPoint. So if anything messes up, it's my fault. So here we go.
It'll be fine.
So here we go. So we'll go, without further ado, we'll launch off.
Awesome. So we have our agenda on the next slide for you, just so you can see what we're hoping to accomplish today. We're going to talk about how remote simultaneous has just been catapulted forward at a unprecedented, right, the word of 2020 that I think we were supposed to ban using, right, for remote simul and COVID, and then those challenges that you're going to face. We'll go through some of that client education, because remember, everyone's got this steep learning curve, and you're the interpreter, so you should know how to do this, right? But there's a learning curve for everyone. And so we'll talk about the tech, the Q&A, a virtual booth, that turn taking. We have some demo videos for you, some that we've created here together, and some that we've had some really great folks help and give permission to use. And then that checklist for success towards the end. And of course, that Q&A.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to launch polling. This is actually one of my favorite parts, is I love to see who's here and what part of the field you're a part of. So whether you're spoken language, sign language, and trainer, maybe you're in a administrative or scheduling capacity, or you work for a language provider, or you have to schedule interpreters for your community. And so we'll go through that. I'll give you just a few minutes. I'll give you a minute here. Got a lot of you voting. That's great. So we ask who you are, and then we go through where you're located, and then your experience in RSI. So it looks like it's slowing down a little bit on who is here. Most of you are spoken language interpreters. We have 4 sign language interpreters. Hi, fellow sign language interpreters. We have some interpreter trainers, about 13% of you, and then other, a good amount of you. I'm going to close it real quick.
And share results briefly?
Yep.
Awesome.
There you are. Okay, so let's go to the next question here. Let's see. Oh, sorry about that. Who we are, where we are from. Okay, here we go. So where are you located? We'll give you a few seconds here. Catherine's in California, so it's nice and bright and early for her. I'm in Minnesota, so it's Central Time. I did see we had someone from Germany. That's probably afternoon for you. Seattle, Washington, I see in the chat.
A little bit from Asia and from Africa even. That's amazing.
Wow.
And from either New Zealand or Australia.
Oh my gosh. The UK. All right, let's do this.
This is always exciting.
I love this part. This is it shouldn't be my favorite part, but it's always my favorite part. All right. So
that's amazing. Welcome everybody from everywhere.
Yeah, and for those who it's the middle of the night, thank you so much.
Exactly.
All right, then let's do the last one. This will be good. This will help. Oh gosh, Danielle. Okay, here we go. And now this is COVID-19 and RSI, where have you done it before COVID hit? Are you doing it for the first time in COVID? It's not over yet. And if you haven't done anything yet, are you thinking about it? Not interested? Okay. This gives us a pulse on who all is out there. Okay. A few more seconds.
Some very interesting. When you share it, we should take a moment to go through it. It's interesting results.
Lima, Peru. All right, looks like slowing down. So 5 more seconds. You're going to vote. 3, 2, 1. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Share results. Here we go.
All right. So what's really interesting to me is that many of us had never done remote interpreting before COVID, and then now a majority of you here have now done it, although not a huge majority. But many of you are thinking about trying it. So, and I'm curious about the not appropriate. I mean, we must have lots of people coming in to try and sort of understand this topic more on that
Right.
not applicable. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Here we go. Awesome. So that's who we are. That's who's here. So that's wonderful. On our next slide here for me, Catherine.
Okay, let me get on to this. There we go.
Okay. So as you know, COVID struck, hard to say, almost a year ago that we've been living in this. And we went from mostly on-site to remote. And things that went from on-site to remote don't necessarily belong remote. And so we've had to kind of cobble this all together. And so everyone's had to adjust. Everyone's had to figure out how to make this work. OPI, can I use that for an LEP meet or an IEP meeting? All sorts of accommodations and adjustments. And unfortunately, as we've all either experienced or witnessed or heard, language access has been terribly, terribly compromised, and it's not equitable, it's not functional equivalency, it's not efficient. All sorts of things have come out of that, and so here we are a year into it, and we're trying to piece that together. And so today is what we'll do. But I love the next slide, because this is probably what it feels like for everybody involved. Holding onto the steering wheel by the tips of your fingers while everything is still propelling. So life stopped for a little while in March, April, and then in May, and then everyone's like, well, we have to keep working, we have to keep doing our jobs, and our life has to go on even though we're in a pandemic, and so let's go. And this is us, the interpreters, the language service providers, the coordinators, schedulers, everyone going, okay, now what? So I just feel like we found this, and it just feels like the perfect representation of what we're doing. We're holding on by the tips of our fingers, but life is still moving. So communication is still happening. I want to call out on the next slide, first for sign language interpreters, for the 4 that are out there, and then for those who watch this after. Sign language interpreters are doing remote work on video for a long time. We have VRS, which is actually Video Relay Service. It's a government funded with US tax dollars that goes towards providing communication for deaf people through interpreters across video, either on a computer or you can use on your phone. So we've been used to remote. It's not been a huge adjustment for sign language interpreters if they've been working in remote, especially in VRS. Most interpreters have had exposure to VRS, but there are challenges of taking what is traditional on-site work and moving it to a VRS, because at the call center, there's a lot of challenges that actually, well, if you go to the next slide, we can talk about that. So with COVID, we had all that face-to-face work kind of go away, and then deaf people still need access, they still need interpreters, and so there was a huge pivot to VRS. And you have traditional call or traditional encounters happening in an environment that's not really set for it, because VRS is for phone calls, it's for scheduling doctor's appointments, ordering pizza, calling the bank or the insurance company. It's meant for how you all and I use a cell phone or a telephone. You just call and you make phone calls, but you're not necessarily having conference calls with a random interpreter. And so the benefits of VRS for that stuff that had to pivot to VRS is that you have interpreters on demand. An interpreter on VRS can call into a Zoom call, and because it's government funded, it's cost savings for whoever previously had to schedule the interpreter, because VRS is free to all deaf consumers for that functional equivalency piece. But it's not the most efficient and effective and successful way to provide equitable language access, because there's no skill-based routing. So if I'm calling into a doctor's appointment for a telehealth visit and I use a VRS interpreter, the VRS interpreter may not actually be the best suited for a medical call. They may actually be great in something else. If you have a longer encounter, let's say you're calling into a conference call for 90 minutes like this, you may end up having to switch interpreters every 10, 15, 20 minutes. And there's no prep. You can't call in and say, all right, I'm going to have a meeting in an hour. I want you, and this is the information I'm going to give you. Teaming with interpreters is really difficult. If you're remote, physically you can't be next to each other, and some of the platforms that VRS happens across does not actually provide for teaming. And then the interpreter can't control what they get. So VRS, again, back to phone calls versus an actual encounter where you would have traditionally pre-COVID scheduled interpreters in advance and done all that beautiful stuff. So that's the biggest impact for sign language interpreters at this point. But I at least wanted to lay that out there, because as we go through this, of course, we'll be speaking largely to the spoken language community, but at least wanted to acknowledge that we have VRS interpreters for sign language. So with that, I turn it over to Catherine for this next part.
Okay, thank you for that lightning tour.
I know.
I wish we could do both, you know, full justice.
Yep.
So we're going to sort of launch into our topic now, and we wanted to begin by kind of showing you what can happen, or certainly things I've experienced and things that maybe you have experienced that will show what we're up against with this remote simultaneous interpreting. So we're going to there's a little bit of a video clip here, and then we'll keep going.
Oh, great, you're here. You're the interpreter for today, right?
Yes, I'm here to interpret for your meeting.
Okay, great. I've done this a few times before, so I'm pretty comfortable now. I'm just going to go ahead and assign you to the interpreter and get things started, okay?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, perfect. I'm going to start letting everybody into the room so we can get started. We had a busy day. Okay.
All right. So that's the beginning. The interpreters come in with basically just dropping in cold accepted assignment. So what's happened here? So we're talking a little bit about what's happened here. So the interpreter has accepted a Zoom simul assignment from a language company. No problem. Yep, I've done this before. So she signs on with no prior communication with the client and gets immediately put onto the interpreting channel. And what could possibly go wrong in this scenario?
Right?
Nothing can go wrong with this. It's easy, right?
It's just interpreting.
Well, we're going to give you a couple examples of things that have gone wrong because of this, that actually end up being sort of deal breakers. So here we go. We're starting, and our Danielle, who's now the presenter in our little fictional show here, is saying, "Hey,
that's
everyone!"
Regina Phalange right there.
Excuse me, that's Regina
That's not
Phalange.
me.
Regina Phalange. Hi, everyone. The webinar is about to get started. I want to welcome all our participants who need interpreting services. You can see I'm showing a slide here that shows you how to get onto the interpreting channels. Great. Got it. Great. Okay. Well, it's time to get started. All right, so I think that most of you watching this are perhaps beginning to understand what is the problem with this scenario. First of all, I'm already off on my interpreting channel. I'm interpreting this, but nobody's listening to me unless they already know how to get onto an interpreting channel. And all of the information for people who don't speak English for how to access their interpreter is being presented in English. And I'm not kidding you. This is a true story. This has happened to me with 3 different clients. Even and again, I mean, these are clients with whom there's even been client education, actually. And it is amazing how hard it can be to get people to understand that you can't tell people who don't speak English how to get onto a channel where they're going to be listening to it in a different language in English. And a couple other scenarios that plays out if you haven't really done your due diligence with client education is, you come in, maybe you're, gone through a language company has set this up, and you think you've got everything set up, and you're like, okay, hi, you could log on. I'm your interpreter, for today's meeting. And then, it's time, can you start the interpreting feature and assign me as a Spanish language interpreter? And Regina says, what? I mean, what? No one told me I had to do that. Do you know how? So immediately you are put into the position of actually having to do the setup, and you may or may not know how to do that, actually, unless you've paid for the extra cost that it takes to have the interpretation feature on Zoom, and played around with it and practiced it. You may not know how to do it. And also, this has happened as well. Was interpreting enabled at the time the meeting was scheduled? I have no idea. So you may find yourself trying to walk them through the process, you're not the host, you can't see all the controls. And then you realize that this meeting has been sent out and advertised as an simultaneous meeting with an interpreter, but the meeting itself was not correctly set up ahead of time. And unfortunately, if you're using Zoom, that's a deal breaker. You can't enable it in the middle. So I've actually had that happen as well, and where we've had to open a new room, give people new links, and migrate the entire meeting over to a new room, right? So these things, these are the kinds of things that can happen. I'm sure you have many other examples. So as we go through this next slide, I wanted to ask you to go ahead and put it in the chat, and maybe you can look at it, Danielle. Just,
Yeah, I got it up right
for
here.
those of you who have been doing remote simultaneous interpreting, what have you been experiencing? You know, what kinds of, what's kind of been your problem when it comes to trying to communicate with the your client or the language service company? These are some of the ones that we wanted to share. First of all, the client does not understand how to enable interpreting. And this could be the IT person who's running the meeting, or it could be the actual presenter. It just depends. You know, there's lots of different kinds of meetings. The client doesn't give appropriate instructions for how to access the interpreting. And this to me is probably the biggest problem that I run into over and over and over again, and trying to get people to understand how critical that is, and that yes, they need to dedicate 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning of their meeting to getting everybody settled on the interpreting meets with a lot of resistance. If you're using Zoom, and many of us, you know, in the non-conference interpreting space are using Zoom for remote simultaneous interpreting, if it's not scheduled correctly, it's a deal breaker, like we just showed. And then probably the other biggest issue I find over in the community interpreting world, you know, in school interpreting and like nonprofit program interpreting, is the participants don't know how to get on. They're accessing with a laptop or a mobile phone. They need a lot of help getting on to the interpretation channel, or to understand how to access the interpreting.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that
Go
echoed
ahead.
in the chat. It's one channel for 3 different languages, and one interpreter could handle all that, and the sending instructions, and they don't get read, and people not knowing how to do any of it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, given what I'm hearing, it's like if you have stories you want to share, you could share them with cross-cultural communications, and we'll make good use of them. Another big actual problem is that often there's not a process for how to handle the question and answer sessions that are typical both to webinars and to interactive meetings. We'll get into that. No one's been assigned to the IT, and often it's assumed the interpreter is going to do it. And you may be new to remote simultaneous interpreting yourself. So you think you've done your due diligence, you've asked the right questions, when in fact, you suddenly realize, oh man, I don't even know what I don't know. And that happens quite a bit you know, until you get onboarded on how to do this. So now that we've kind of looked at what we're dealing with and what we're flailing around with, let's just go back and do a little bit of defining of what we're talking about to make sure we all understand, because even just these terms can get really fuzzy. So prior to COVID, out in the big wide world, outside of conference interpreting, remote interpreting typically meant over the phone interpreting, which is, you know, the classic, you have an on-call interpreter on a, you know, phone platform. And the big, sort of infrastructure build out on this was that there were, pools of interpreters who are connected to this platform if they're on shift, and it just as Danielle was describing with the VRS, they're on demand, right? And that was true for video remote interpreting, right? So you were connected, just very similarly to what Danielle was showing. You've got a video, sometimes people are in one room and the interpreter's remote, but usually it was going through a language service company who specialized with video remote interpreting, and the interpreters are on demand, right? So that is not what we're talking about today. That's not what we're talking about today, right? So what we're talking about is and one of the reasons why is all of this is consecutive. This is all done over a single audio channel, and it's consecutive interpreting. But now what happens when you try to layer on remote simultaneous interpreting into a virtual meeting, especially where everyone's virtual? And so prior to COVID, we had an evolving space where there were dedicated RSI platforms, just like there are dedicated BRI and OPI platforms. And I'm showing you this graphic, and we're just going to walk through it quickly, just so you understand how complicated it is.
I'm like, this is
Yeah,
a,
even
a
if
little
you
nauseating going
like,
from the
yeah,
other
it's a little
pictures to this.
right? Can you understand this? So, how does this work? So you have the presenter, you have Regina. Say we have Regina here, and she's she's just like I'm presenting with a PowerPoint. You've got a presenter, and so then you've got, and so she's on the screen. She's a little video. She's showing her PowerPoint. So you have people listening directly to the English channel who are remote attendees, and they're listening and they don't have any problem. They log on, they're going to be able to hear it. They're, that they don't have the issue. But then you have people who speak other languages that you want to attend, right? So they log on, but they need another audio channel to hop onto, right? So this is, even with a dedicated platform, you will have multiple interpreters also logged in, but they're going to be logged in on a back end with a dashboard that's for them, for the interpreter. And that dashboard is going to be basically a virtual booth that's built into the platform, and where the interpreters can chat and team interpret and request a handover and say when they're going to be switching and troubleshoot and problem solve. So it becomes like a virtual booth. And that's all built into the platform. And increasingly with these dedicated platforms, they also come with pools of interpreters. It's not usually on demand, but it's like those platforms have interpreters who are trained on the platforms, and they know how to work it, right? That's not what we're doing, right? Those of us that are out here in the community interpreting and healthcare, and all of a sudden, what's happened? COVID happened, the entire world went remote, and everybody went remote on the video conferencing platforms that they were used to using. And which is like, everything from FaceTime to Zoom to Google Meet to Microsoft Teams, right? And these are not designed for remote simultaneous interpreting. We'll talk about Zoom in a moment. So what do you have? You have the same English remote attendees, right? They don't have a problem. They log on, they can hear the audio channel. But what happened? How do you get a second audio channel on these? Well, now you have your remote language interpreters, and typically you end up with a phone bridge, right? So you've got people attending with two devices. They're attending on the video to see the presentation, and then they're listening to the interpretation on a separate phone bridge. And the interpreters are listening to the English off of the video conference, and then they're interpreting over their phone bridge, and they have a third channel set up. They have to create their own virtual booth, and so that they can communicate with each other and do the hands off and have some way of knowing what's going on.
And we knew all how to do this, right? Immediately when COVID hit, right? And we all knew how to do this. This is simple, no problem.
Simple. That's what we're trying to go through. So so that's basically your, just, to go through, like, this is, the world. And now you've got Zoom, which is a hybrid platform. Zoom, got in under the wire in the fall of 2019 and announced a simultaneous feature, but it's really only half a solution. And so when you're on Zoom, attendees see this little globe and this interpretation. They can click on it, they can pick their channel. And when you're the interpreter on Zoom, you are assigned as an interpreter, and then you're working off of a channel, and it could be Spanish or any number of any number of languages. And as we've talked about, this all has to be set up ahead of time. And you have these things that make Zoom complicated because they didn't really build out their platform fully. So the English channel is what everyone hears, but if you don't click on the English channel as an attendee, you can't hear the interpreter if the interpreter needs to go in both directions. And once you're assigned as the interpreter, nobody hears you unless they're on your channel, and you cannot hear the other interpreter. So even though, like, Danielle and I might both be set up as the interpreters, like, we can't hear each other. so it's like it works, but there's still a lot that you have to do. So that's a quick run through, or maybe not so quick run through, of just what we're looking at, what the world of platforms are. I'm going to hand it off to Danielle here to sum this all up.
So I call this our platform buffet, because you would think, all right, well, if I can just learn like one platform, we're going to be all right. Whether it's an RSI platform like Kudo, Interprify, VoiceBox, Interactio, Ablio, you name it, it's up here. And if you haven't named it, it's probably coming. Then we have our non-RSI platforms, the GoToMeeting, the WebEx, the Google Meets. And then we move into our non-RSI platforms, where you have to do a lot of extra configuration for that second audio channel, conference calls, whatever you can to be able to get connected. And then these integration ones that are trying to make it work. So Teams and WebEx, and as it says here, that list will grow. And then Zoom kind of floats in the middle, right? That hybrid. But as the interpreter, you can't just learn one, because you never know which the assignment is going to be. You don't know which platform the assignment's going to be using, or what they have available, or even if they know other things. So again, it's all overwhelming.
And what I would add to that is that if you look at the dedicated RSI platforms, the ones that are made for remote interpreting, simultaneous interpreting, you'll see those 6 main ones, which were kind of the big 6 before COVID, and all those ones in yellow as of this fall are the new RSI platforms that have been launched and are trying to get out there. So there's now 18 that are in the space. So you can see it's really expanding, but that's not where we're working, because they're expensive, right? Those platforms have developed in the conference interpreting space, are used for like UN and EU and on all the rest of it. And we so far don't have an affordable solution.
And that's affordable for the like language service companies or the schools that have to provide interpreting. It's them who have to pay to have access to the platform, to use the platform. And so because of budgets and availability, they're all working in these non-RSI platforms where you have to become the expert to figure out how to do it, if it's even possible, depending on what you're doing. So this next slide is meant to be overwhelming, because that's how this whole process has really become. Like, it's like that Home Alone, if you've ever seen that, where Kevin McAllister puts his hands on his face and is like, I realize I'm home alone. I'm realizing how much stuff I actually have to do to get ready for remote interpreting. It's a lot, and it's a lot because of the client education, right? Because you can do everything you have to do. And then you have a client who thinks they know what they're doing, which I actually think is more dangerous than a client who has no idea and knows that they have no idea. So, and the client education includes the person paying or contracting the interpreter, and that would be the language service company and your interpreting partner. Because remember what we said at the beginning, one of the challenges are maybe you don't really know, and you have less experience than your team interpreter. And so you're trying to, one, teach each other and also get this working. Oh, and by the way, do client education. So it's a lot to process, and it's a lot to think about, not just for your own tech setup in your own environment, but also have to be the subject matter expert in something that not many people are subject matter experts.
But lest I'm going to go back here for just a second, because lest we totally freak you out, we probably panicked you. We're going to spend the rest of the webinar now, showing you how to walk through this, because the truth is once you do run through this several times and you learn how to kind of go through this process, many interpreters are out there doing this especially in school settings, for example, who are having to set this up, and there are solutions, and we're finding our way forward. So don't despair. Please don't leave the webinar in complete despair.
No, we're 33 minutes in. I promise you, we're going to give you the next 30 minutes or so with actual tangible things, right?
Yeah.
So RSI is a new world, and we have it coming in 2 different ways, either with a language service company that they're setting up the RSI assignments, they've got the web conferencing or the platform you're going to use, and you work directly with that company. Maybe they have an IT person assigned, or you have a booth partner. All that stuff is coordinated by them. Or you have it as a direct client where you've contracted directly and you have to be your IT person. You have to coordinate all the platform needs and the arrangements to get into it, and you may have to find your team interpreter. And so there's 2 channels, and not one is necessarily easier than the other, because maybe you're working with a language service company that's pivoting into RSI because they have to, and even they don't really understand what to do and haven't had a lot of exposure to it. Either way, client education is required. So it's not one's easier or harder than the other. It just is a matter of how informed and prepared and experienced your clients are on RSI. Okay. So what kind of RSI assignments do we have? Here's a sample, and I'll preface that this list is always growing, especially now. It's not just conference interpreting. We're getting traditional conference, but we're talking education. So as Catherine said, a lot of the educational environments are pivoting to RSI because of COVID, and we have to. Healthcare, so that could be classes, COVID-related public meetings. We've seen a lot of those. In sign language, we've seen it. We get to have the interpreter right on TV, and we have certified deaf interpreters. And so ASL interpreters aren't really doing that so much as the spoken language, but you're just seeing an increase of language access, especially because of COVID. Local government, nonprofit, and then legal and court interpreting. And all of this is happening. You've either known someone or seen someone, and that list, like I said, is growing. Things that you thought would never be RSI are all of a sudden RSI. We just got to make it work.
And I'd add to there a couple of things. One is that just to really highlight that only in the conference interpreting area and sort of business conferences where people really beginning to get used to, okay, how can we do an event remotely? And, it's very supported and the interpreters are very supported and you're not responsible for client education there. But basically in every other setting, everybody's new to this, right? And so it's not structured and people are doing these things for the first time. And I wanted to just sort of add as well with the legal court interpreting, Marjorie, that might be a good topic if we haven't covered it enough, to see what the courts have been doing, because it's all over the map, state by state, and from federal. It's like the immigration courts. My understanding of now using WebEx across the board, which is kind of a nightmare for some of the interpreters who have to figure out how to set up that back channel. But other states are using Zoom. Others are still just not doing, the actual trials. They just do the lesser, procedures. So that's kind of a separate topic as well. But believe me, they're on this journey as well. So
awesome. And so I turn it back over to you. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I turned it over to myself. Hang on to that. So the other final thing that we wanted to kind of describe about what it is that, what you're navigating, because it's important to understand where, what you're navigating so you know how to ask the right questions and set up each of your events correctly. Is that there's really remote simultaneous interpreting is coming into our space with two different kinds of meetings. And one would be this kind of meeting, a webinar, where all the attendees are, your microphone and your camera is off, and the way that we're communicating with you is through a chat window or a Q&A, some kind of Q&A function. And this is similar to more of, traditional remote simultaneous interpreting, because in this case, I'm going to have my camera off. You're going to be listening to me on whatever channel's been set up. I'm going to probably be mostly interpreting in one direction. I might toggle back and forth for question and answers, but it's more like a traditional simultaneous. But a lot of these meetings that now are starting to use remote simultaneous are actually, meetings where you've got a group of people who are all talking to each other, everybody's camera's on, everybody's mic is on, and you are also visible in the meeting, and you are probably going bi-directionally the way you would typically in a consecutive meeting, except you're using simultaneous. And so that actually is making us shift how we're using simultaneous. And we're going to go into that in a little bit, how you end up having to navigate turn taking and things like that, even when you're using simultaneous. So the kind of meeting is very important. And so, we've already gone through some of the challenges, but this is similar to the slide that Danielle showed on the, VRS for the sign language interpreting. One of the hardest things is that people just think, so, or they just think, oh, it's just like OPI, it's just like VRI. Come on, just Zoom has a feature, call in, we'll make it work. And you're just interpreting, it's not that hard. People actually think this. I've certainly run into this quite a bit. The other issue that you really need to keep in mind is that every encounter is different. So if you're working through a language service company and they just say, hey, we have an assignment for you, can you interpret, for your public health, update next Wednesday, and you just go, yep, great, see you there. If you haven't done it before, you've really got to ask all these questions. Who is it going to be? What's the platform? What's the topic? Is there going to be a team interpreter? What are the dynamics? And so I know for me that I have a whole new series of questions that I run through to make sure I understand how the meeting's being set up. And that includes asking, is it being recorded? Because chances are it is. And is it being live streamed? Because if it's a community meeting, it probably is. So, and will it be posted up later? Probably. So you may end up interpreting something that becomes a permanent record, which is a whole different topic in conference interpreting than what's happening now over in sort of community and other areas.
And deciding if that's right for you, right?
Yeah.
You may not, for whatever reason, may not want to be a part of an assignment where it's going to be future seen or listened to. Yeah.
But they're not going to tell you often, not out of any kind of, bad intention, just it doesn't occur to
They
people.
don't even
It
think about
doesn't
it.
occur to people. People are really, often so unfamiliar with what we're doing. Doesn't even occur to them that being interpreted or being recorded may be an issue, or there may be other things you need to worry about. I've actually renegotiated entire assignments. It's like, well, I'm going into Spanish. It's my B language. You want to record me and then have me be up there for all eternity, up on Facebook. I don't know if I want that, right?
Mhm.
So you have to make those thoughts. So these are the kind of 4 areas we want to focus on now to give you tools. We're going to start in with the tech, and here we're going to come into a second little video, and now we're going to see if I've got this set up well. All right, we're going to show part of this video and then go into the next slides. And this video is featuring Kadi Kaufman, who hopefully will be coming on for our question and answer. So here we go. So the first thing, just to give you a little preface, is we're going to just show what setup do you need? Do you have what you need in order to be able to do this? So.
Welcome to this video on how to work as a team interpreter on Zoom. I'm Katie Kaufman, and I'm here today with a wonderful Catherine Allen, and together we're going to be showing you our setups first, and then how we actually work as team interpreters on a Zoom conference using, in this case, WhatsApp as a back channel. So Catherine, why don't you tell us a little bit about your system?
All right, well, I think you can see here that I've got a ring light and I have my WhatsApp back channel actually posted up there, and I have my laptop where I'm actually looking at Zoom, as well as having WhatsApp on my computer in case texting becomes necessary. And then I have another monitor over here where I've got my documents and dictionaries open and anything I need to refer to.
That's very, very similar to the way I do it. So I have my conference going on one screen, my documents and my WhatsApp communication on the other, my WhatsApp video. And I also have a cell phone, an additional one just for backup. Of course, I'm on Ethernet. I'm hardwired as we should be, have my professional mic and headset and everything going on. But every once in a while, things happen and I might need to hotspot off this other cell phone. So I keep it as a backup as well. I also have another laptop that I use from time to time, also when things get really, really busy. But you don't need all that real estate, all that screen space to make this work. You can do it with one screen and one cell phone for that all important back channel.
Mhm.
All right, so let's get this conference going so we can show you how it's done.
All right, so we will come back to the next part of this video in just a few moments, and I'm hoping everything's displaying as they should. You'll tell me if it's not.
Yep, we're good.
And I think it's on to you, correct?
Yep. So as Catherine said just a few minutes ago, she has a whole list of things that she goes through now when accepting an assignment and when she's getting ready for it. And so the good news, because I've seen it show up here a bit, you will be getting this. We wrote and put this PowerPoint together not only for you to have to attend and hear about it, but so that you can actually have something tangible at the end too. So when accepting the assignment, right, is it direct or through a language service company? Because if it's direct, that means you will probably be doing a lot more heavy lifting on the IT and arrangements ahead of time. Have they ever done an RSI meeting before? The more experienced they are, probably the smoother it's going to be. And if they haven't, again, that client education is going to be heavy on the front end. What kind of meeting is it? Will you have a team, an interpreting partner, so that you can coordinate? And again, how much experience do they have as an RSI interpreter? And what platform is it on? As you saw the buffet, there's 30 of them up there. What platform are they using? If it's on Zoom, who's going to handle the channels? I saw someone in the chat say it shouldn't be them controlling the channels, it should be us. So have you even thought how to coordinate that with them? Do you need a phone bridge for interpreting? Because they're going to be in one platform and you're going to be calling and speaking to the person needing the interpreting services on another line. Live stream or recorded. I know I don't do live stream or recorded interpreting work. Nope. And so it's important to ask that, as Catherine just was talking about. And you see the 2 bold ones. Who is responsible for IT? You're interpreting. And if something goes haywire, are you also expected to resolve it? Or is someone even going to be monitoring it? And who will be doing that and having that established ahead of time? And will there be a tech check? And you may think this is a tech check, but the tech check is actually what happens right before the assignment starts. And it's this beautiful list. And it's a lot, yes. And as we've been talking, this is a lot of information. But again, you will be able to take this and have it and print it and follow it. So how will the attendees receive the information? How will they be told or instructed on getting a hold of the interpreter? Is there a visual that you can show? So you saw the Zoom one earlier, and that was in English, but if it was in the language that was needed for interpreting, is that available, or at least a visual? Because half the time, right, sometimes like, okay, click on this and that, and like, just show me what you want me to do. So is there a visual? Is it set with interpreting channels? Are they enabled, right? If everyone's sound quality is set, are they using headphones or speaker? Speaker we know is really difficult. Is there something you can advocate for when it comes to headset and a mic? Is there going to be Q&A or dialogue? How is that going to happen? Is there going to be turn taking? Are you going to be responsible for monitoring Q&A, especially as I saw someone in the chat earlier say, you're interpreting and then you're looking at chat because participants are writing in their language, say Spanish, and you have to keep an eye on that while interpreting. Have you laid that plan out? Maybe your team interpreter will be monitoring that. Your my apologies, this is identity. Identify and share contact information with the primary contact for the encounter, for the assignment. Who hires you may not actually be involved. So who's actually going to be involved?
And
in
have it immediately accessible, written down in big numbers somewhere visual. Yeah, don't search for it in an email.
Right.
Yeah.
And then who is responsible for solving tech issues? I know you asked it when you accepted the assignment, but things change, especially if you accept it well in advance. Who on site is responsible for it? And is there anything you can get in advance at all to help you? So all of this is part of getting ready. And there are no shortcuts. Maybe for you, it'll be really slick and easy and fast because you've been doing this a lot more. But remember, have they done RSI before?
Yeah.
Have they done it regularly? Maybe they have, but it's been 6 months. Or maybe your team isn't. So even though you may think, I think I know these answers to these questions because I can tell, still ask them because that client education, they're going to learn too. And then maybe the next time they ask for an RSI assignment, they come to you in a perfect world going, okay, Catherine, okay, Danielle, so this is all this stuff because you've taught us so well by asking these questions every time. So the client education or the tech check ahead of time and during and when you're accepting the assignment is not only for your own sanity and your own preparation, it's also passively teaching clients what to expect and how to support the communities they're providing services for.
And once you've done this process, the big heavy lift at the front end, if you have a repeat client, a repeat assignment, you don't have to do it over and over again. Everyone learns how to do it. And then it does get simple. Then it is, hey, can you interpret next week? And, it's all the same setup and everyone knows what they're doing. But at the beginning, you do need to take care of this.
Yep. And so this goes to Catherine, and she's going to do a bit of the heavy lifting here because she's been living it, right? Like a lot of you. She's been living it.
We're going to plow forward to make sure we get all this to you because this is where we have some more of our demos and we really want to show it to you. Yep. So let's go through logging on and Q&A. So we're going to watch this next segment of this video that Kadia and I made just to kind of show you what it looks like when someone actually is trying to show the client how to get on. So here we go. Now the trick to having an RSI event on Zoom is that there's this moment at the beginning where you have to help people get onto the interpreting channel. And in that case, you can see I've signed in as interpreter 1 and we have interpreter 2 already muted and with her audio off. It is good to have some kind of visual perhaps or script where you can let people know how to get onto the interpretation channels. And basically you're saying something along the lines of, in a moment, there's going to be a little globe that appears at the bottom of your screen and, follow these instructions to get onto the interpretation channel. And you may or may not be, you may just be saying that directly, or you may be interpreting consecutively with your host using a script, but often you may be the ones who have to provide either the visual or the script. All right, and so we're done with this piece of it, and now the host will enable the interpreting, and that will be the next step we're going to show. All right, so this video obviously is walking through some of the Zoom. In the final video we show for this is actually going to show you how to do this on a Google Meet with a phone bridge. So I promise we're getting there. Now that slide, of course, was in English. We're going to show you some samples as well of welcome slides that work or don't work. These are actual slides. You can see I've blurred out this slide, but this is a slide that a repeat assignment that I do. They show it every time. It drives me crazy because what's the problem here? The entire slide is in English except for the little bits of click on the icon for interpreting icon in the lower part of your screen, right? So welcome to our Spanish speakers. Everything's in English. It just want to tear my hair out. So it's not perfect, but it's there. But it definitely isn't perfect because by this time I've been shoved off onto the interpreting channel and I'm interpreting them, welcoming the Spanish speakers in English, and they're not hearing me. These are some examples of the login slide that repeated the one that our Tamber Hilton, who has provided an RSI a webinar for CCC, which I think is available on YouTube earlier. She's amazing. So she shared her slides. You see there's one in Bangladesh. These are the slides, that they need to be in the language for the people who are trying to access them. And then this other slide is shared courtesy of Chesco Linguistic Services. This is a slide that they share with their clients for the Spanish English, to try and help people learn. And clearly they're complicated slides, like it's not easy to get on. So this is better, right? But it usually requires an explanation as well. And then I wanted to go ahead and share with you the school districts are really plowing ahead in this arena because they really have to work hard with a lot of the families who don't speak English and who may be low resource with technology and not, how to get onto these RSI sessions. So this Mario Garcia, who may be in the audience, if you are, thank you so much for sharing this. He's been putting on a series of amazing webinars inside his own school district. He, shows that you can set up your Zoom meeting room with text to say, this is what's going to happen. And you could have it be in different languages, right? The special education division of the San Diego Unified School District has provided scripts for the interpreters for what to say when you're on those interactive meetings, right? So it's like, this is how we're going to make this work. So as the interpreter, you have to take your agency and tell people how it's going to work to have a bilingual meeting. And then this is an example of a resource that they share with their Spanish speaking families that is very visual, but also with lots of writing to try and show them how to get onto these channels and how to use the interpreting. So it's not just my own personal experience that we're living through. I mean, that we're trying to share. It's like, this is shared experience of across the board. People are finding, right? We're like trying to find the solutions for this, right? So that's a little bit about, about the just sort of, you got to have logon strategies, right? It isn't actually simple. It's one of the, it's the make or break moment of your meeting. Can people get on? And then the other part of one of these that often gets neglected is, how is Q&A happening? Is it going, just like in this webinar, is it going to be on a Q&A feature? Is it going to be on chat? Will people raise their hands? Are they going to be asking verbal questions? Who's monitoring the chat? The interpreter certainly isn't if they're interpreting simultaneously. And so this is something that you need to debrief and manage and set up and even practice a little bit, if necessary. And you also have to negotiate this with your partner. If you have a partner, who's going to do it? Is one partner just going to hang out on the other channel and, to interpret everything on the other channel? So this is all a negotiation that has to be thought up ahead of time. Just you'll have the slide deck to go back and think about this when you go through this. All right, so let's look a little. Go ahead.
It gives them ideas on what, because you may not even know, but like we saw, you have the text in language and then the visuals too, because someone commented about the illiterate population that they might be serving, and sometimes it's going to have to be those visuals for folks, right, and conversations.
And I've had trainings where you've had 6 English speakers and 4 Spanish speakers, and somebody from the agency staff is actually, because they know their community, has gone offline, called the person having a hard time logging on and spent 10 or 15 minutes getting them logged on so they could attend the training. I mean, it really can be, it just really is a big issue. All right, so we're going to show the last part of this video that we did with Kari Kaufman, just to show you now what is either called the virtual booth or the back channel. And this is actually really critical, because if you're doing anything longer than, a half hour, 45 minutes, or you really want to try and have a team with you. And then you have to know how to you have to have a way to communicate with each other.
Absolutely.
So let's look at how we set this up. Okay, as we were saying, the next step will be that the host, sorry, we're going to have a little bit about I should have continued to show. So I made it about just how you accept the interpreting assignment, then we'll go to the back channel. My apologies. Host will turn on the interpretation feature and the little globe will appear at the bottom. And as the interpreter, you are going to see this box that says you've been assigned as an interpreter. You say okay. And I have been assigned as a Spanish interpreter, so you can see that I can toggle back and forth between Spanish and English by clicking on these two buttons. And while I'm interpreting, I will turn off my video, and the other interpreter will have her or his video turned off and will be muted. And when we do our switch, which we're going to show in the next segment, the other interpreter will unmute. Now we're at the step where we want to explain how you can set up a back channel booth with your interpreting partner. Because if you're interpreting on Zoom, you actually can't hear each other, and you need a way to communicate to let each other know when you're ready to switch off or to help each other out in any other way, or to troubleshoot in case there's some kind of disaster like somebody's internet gets cut off. So what you do is you need to have some kind of prearranged signal. Many interpreters will use the signal that if you are the one person interpreting and you're trying to let your partner know you're ready to switch, that you will do a little finger wag, and then your partner will give a thumbs up. And then when you're ready to do that actual switch, you will then give a thumbs up to your partner. And at that moment, you will mute yourself on Zoom, and your partner will open their microphone and start interpreting. And you will also mute yourself on the back channel. So the general rule is that if you are interpreting, you want to have both mics open so that your partner can listen to you, as well as the attendees who need interpreting can listen to you. But if you're not interpreting, you want to mute both, because you don't want any of the attendees on Zoom hearing you, and you don't want to suddenly speak into your partner's ears by action over an open microphone on your back channel. So that's kind of the basics of having a back channel. This happens to be a WhatsApp call, it could be a FaceTime call, it could be any kind of video app that works for you. And there are even some that you can use directly on the computer, such as Google Meet and an app called Whereby. You have lots of options. All right. So easy peasy. Hopefully you're beginning to understand why this takes prep and practice, but it does work. You get better at it and you get faster at it. So we're going to just quickly rehash a little bit of that and give you some visuals for that. You have several options. So this, is a visual representation of the negotiation. You may be assigned a partner. I've been assigned partners I've never met. I have to get their information. I have to communicate with them ahead of the meeting. And at least for the first go round, we have to decide, are we using WhatsApp? How are we doing it? Well, I usually do it this way. And you have to, it's a little bit of a dance. It's awkward. Nobody's training us on this, but it's a critical step. So you can use a second device with a video call to coordinate with your partner, as we just saw on the little demo video we showed. You can also, and I've done this well and it works well, if you're using Zoom, you can log on to Zoom as a participant with a second device and listen to the interpreting that way, so you can get access to listen to the interpreting and then use the Zoom chat to do the switch over. All this, I know, is so abstract. You just have to go play with it and practice it in order for it to really sort of work and for you to know how it goes. And then this final option, which we mentioned at the end of that video, and this is an actual screen grab from an actual assignment, which is live on YouTube, so I feel like I can share this, of what it looked like when I was interpreting for an assignment, where there was, that we had, both of us were using Whereby, which has this benefit of you can have two video apps open on a single device on a single screen. So, if you have a hard time switching between screens, this might be a good solution for you. We're using Whereby as our back channel, and then we're using the Whereby chat to say, okay, ready to switch or to deal with whatever issues. And then here we are actually also logged into Zoom and we're interpreting, and you can see the channel, at that time, at that point, one of the interpreters was, or I was on the English channel, I guess. So I hope your heads aren't completely spinning, but these are the different ways you can set up the virtual booth, because none of these platforms are designed with one. And yes, just to make sure you really, really understand how this happens, that you are managing at least 2 audio channels, and you are having to figure out how to get both of those audios into your head. And believe me, there's many, many different ways that you can kind of hack this. And the more technical you are, you can do consoles and set up your own things. But one way or the other, you're going to have your video. You're going to have maybe a headset with earbuds underneath your headset, or one ear on and one ear off. It's something you have to learn how to manage the sound. And I'm going to acknowledge, I know that we're at the top of the hour, but we're going to take maybe 5 minutes over into the question and answer, just finish this up for you and give you this information. So the final thing that we wanted to show you was a demo of what happens when you have an interactive meeting, where you do not have Zoom, you don't have the channels, you have a phone bridge, and how you have to communicate and how you have to turn take on, how this is where you end up kind of having simultaneous with a lot of consecutive interpreting elements. So you're going to enjoy were you Regina still? I think I heard this one. I can't remember.
I don't know if I'm still Regina Phalange in this one.
Yeah, but then we're back to Danielle and me demoing this. So go ahead and play the video for you. And the setup here is a teacher is meeting with a parent over Google Meet. The interpreter is communicating with the teacher in English over the Google Meet platform, and communicating with the parent in Spanish on a mobile phone call, which has already been set up. So pay attention to how I mute and unmute on that.
Okay, great. Oh, I see you're both here. Hi, Rocio. So happy you made it. And Catherine, the interpreter for today, right?
Yes, I'm the interpreter today. It's nice to meet you. Okay. And can I just ask a question I'd like to ask? Have you ever run a meeting with this kind of simultaneous interpreting before?
No, because of everything that's happened, we're now doing it this way. This is my first time.
Okay, so I just want to let you know that I have Mom here on the call. You can see her, but she actually can't hear you. The only way we can make this work simultaneously is if she's on a phone connection, so she can see you and see what you're showing, but I'm actually speaking to her on this phone call. And so
that's why she's got a phone up to her ear. Okay.
Right. So I have to go back and forth. You won't be able to hear each other. You're only going to be able to hear each other through me. So when you start speaking, I'm going to mute myself and you're going to see my mouth moving, but I'm actually just speaking to her. And then if she interrupts or needs to say anything, I may give you a signal like this to let you know that she's trying to speak. And then I will come back over and interpret for you. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, let's do it. Sure.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to go.
Okay. Okay, so my biggest concern at this point is Enrique's attendance, especially in math and physical education, to the Zoom and Google Meet classes, because you can see it's impacting his grades. He's getting C's now, and that's really related to his attendance. Oh, yep, go ahead.
Yes, I'm worried about that too. I'm having a really hard time having him stay on the class, stay in front of the computer. I work, I try to supervise him, but it's hard to do. I have a hard time making sure he's attending class. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. I know how hard it can be if you're working and there's other kids and it's a long day in front of the computer. But
okay. So if that kind of makes your brain go boom, it does me too. It's so much to manage. So you can see why doing remote interpreting in general, but doing RSI, you have a whole big technical skill set and cognitive set of tasks that you have to get going on. So just to wrap up on this idea, and that there's so much more to explore about this, and we will be exploring it, but we now have this remote simultaneous that's playing out that has a whole lot of consecutive elements, because you need to have especially with and also protocol elements, where you need to have an introduction, you need to have a script, you may need to run through and show people how that works, especially the first time. and you're visible, right? You really need to be visible. You're part of the discussion, and you have to have that agency to make sure that that multilingual communication actually happens. Because if you don't, that parent's voice, especially, it's typically the one who doesn't speak English, their voice you have to do that interrupting to make sure that their concerns and their comments come through. And again, I want to, give a shout out to San Diego Unified School District and for sharing this script here. And I see we've got Kadi coming on, and we're just wrapping up. So basically, we just want to say we are boldly going where no one has gone before. You're seeing a lot of us trying to figure out how to protocolize and checklist and compartmentalize this information in a way that can be helpful for you. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Danielle to bring it on home. Danielle.
Yep. So we have another checklist that is consolidated from what's before, right? So, and I see it in the chat. You will be getting copies of this so you can have your desperate pleas to do screenshots. It's okay. You're getting this in your hands. And so you have this checklist. I won't go through it again because we've talked about it and I really want to get to your questions, but it's what you do ahead of time, that client education, that practice with the setup and a team interpreter. It's really going to make or break the experience for everybody. And to Catherine's point, we have to be able to support communicative autonomy, giving everyone the ability and responsibility and freedom to communicate the way they can and want to. So that agency, that authority of, I have to ask these questions if this is going to be successful, is the best you can do. So if you go to the next slide, these next two slides just have some resources for you. There's lots of videos on YouTube, on Cross-Cultural Communications website for you to go through. So this is just one of many videos out there for you to reference and learn from. And then, of course, there's the Remote Simul Interpreting YouTube channel that you can go to as well. And then before we kick it over for Q&A, we have to tell you about the Remote Interpreter textbook that Catherine, myself, Tati, and Sarah, and Dieter, and Carolyn are all writing right now. It will be out this year, and it is going to be just a goldmine of great information about remote interpreting. So even before COVID struck, this book was in progress, and we are coming close to having it ready for you. And it will be a great tool and textbook really to help you become a remote interpreter. So everything that we've been talking about here is sourced from this incredible team of subject matter experts and advocates for remote interpreting.
And that's it. So we want to say thank you for our part. And we want to also welcome, I saw Kadi actually came on. So we have our subject matter expert, and I think I'm going to stop the slide share here, but I think we should start our question and answer. Maybe Margie, if you want to come on, but we should let Kadi give her a moment so she can introduce herself, and then we'll go to the Q&A. And thank you everybody for that, staying with us during that whirlwind tour.
Kadi, you are so very welcome here. Did you want to say a word with the warning that there's 300,750 questions awaiting you?
I'm sure there are, and I have just arrived home to find that my wonderful high-speed internet service is down. So I am on my phone. I hope that you can hear me again.
Hear you.
These are things, great. These are things that happen in the real RSI world. I have a huge event tomorrow, and I'm having a bit of a panic attack. So
and she's arriving home in Santiago, Chile, by the way.
After an 8-hour drive. So yeah, it'll be an interesting day, but I do look forward to your questions, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to tune in for the presentation itself, but if I can be of any assistance, I'm here to help.
Perfect. Well, let's get started without further ado. I've color-coded the questions, and there's still so many high priority ones. Let me jump right in with a simple one. Somebody just quickly wants to know, what RSI platform can teams integrate with, because one of their clients badly wants that option?
So I think I do believe, so Kadi, maybe you can answer this as well. I do believe Kudo has created an integration with Teams. Is that correct? Or am I?
Yes.
Yes.
Kudo has, Interprify has also just launched an integration system for all of the platforms. And a third option is not that well known. It's called Ablio Conference. an
Out of Italy.
Ablio conference, yeah, out of Italy, and their site is getting the conference organized. It can be kind of tricky. It's not a particularly intuitive interface for the person configuring the meeting. It is for the interpreter. But you can use Ablio Conference for anything that you can run in a Chrome tab. It has to be Chrome and it has to be running on Windows. But if it can be Teams, it can be Zoom, it can be anything that you can run in a Chrome tab on Windows is compatible with Ablio Conference.
All right. If you have a two-person meeting, like a parent-teacher meeting, why would you not interpret it in consecutive mode like you would face-to-face?
So I'm going to answer this. I'll just jump in and say, because, so I spent several days earlier this fall interpreting that precise kind of meeting. And it was because the school district had decided that equal access was equal time. And they realized that if they did it with RSI, they could have the meetings with the non-English speaking or the limited English speaking families go, they have 30 minutes for the English speaking families, 30 minutes for everybody. And so they insisted on it. So it's not always, is it always best practice? Not necessarily, but it's clients are cottoning on to the fact like, hey, we can do this faster. And that's coming into the market. So I agree with you. The consecutive, reality is reality. I mean, it works, but I did on that one, we had a couple teachers who actually said, nope, we're doing this. They understood, they did it consecutively, and they took control of the communication and it was very effective. And then from that anecdotal experience, I felt like the parents had a little bit more voice in the meeting, but yeah, it's because there's lots of reasons why. Yeah.
Great. Are any of the presenters subscribers to Zoom RSI? Can they provide step-by-step instructions on how to go about getting the subscription? By the way, if there are any step-by-step instructions, I, as Marjorie, I'm saying they could perhaps be sent by email.
Yeah, well, the step we can do that, and I'll let Kari answer here too. But basically, you just need to subscribe to a plan that allows you to have a webinar. So you have to get up to the rate. I think it's the Business Pro, and you make sure that you have added a webinar capacity onto your Zoom account, and you can do this month by month actually, and just do it for a month and then not do it for a month, and then you have access to it. So Kari, I don't know if you want to say anything else, but
nope, that's it.
Yep.
And then log out of your Zoom account and then log back in.
Right, exactly. To make sure it activates, right. Yeah.
What liabilities do I face by providing the interpretation platform? Are there steps I can take to limit these liabilities? For example, should I contract with someone to act as the host or technical support so that I don't have to wear all the hats while interpreting?
Kari, you want to start?
Sure. There is a set of recommendations from the International Association of Conference Interpreters, AIC, that is an incredibly detailed checklist for remote interpreters. It may be a little overwhelming at first read, but if you go through that, you will find pretty much all of the information that you need, the questions that you need to ask your clients, things that you can include in your contract so that you don't end up being liable if their internet crashes, for example. So there's a lot of information available there. Just read through the checklist and take what you need from it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Catherine, were you going to add something?
No, that's great. It's a great resource.
Normally we don't answer questions about fees, but I know you guys have a general answer to the next question that won't get us in legal trouble. What is the presenter's understanding of interpreter fees for remote interpretation versus in-person interpretation?
Well, there's definitely a different world between the different areas, between conference and other areas. And the generic answer, and Danielle, do you want to give the generic answer?
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends. That's it. Really, what I think people are surprised about, though, when they're requesting RSI interpreters and assignments is the platforms are expensive to subscribe to if you're contracting for it, and they don't realize why is it not the same? Why is it not the same price? And it depends on your location and where you are and the kind of client and all that stuff. So I know in my experience, since COVID has started, and we've been partnering with interpreters where I work to find out what they would charge for RSI. It's taken everyone back a little bit, but as you can see here, there's just so much involved, and it requires a different skill set that comes with a different rate.
Yeah, and I would say that what's coming into go ahead. Yep.
I was just going to add, preparing for a remote simultaneous event, it takes the same amount of work to prepare really for an hour as it does for 2 hours or 3 hours. You need to do your homework. You need to look into who the speakers are. You need to do all of your homework, prepare your glossary. And so that is a lot of work for any sort of an assignment that continues to exist for RSI, not just on-site interpreting, simultaneous interpreting. But then you have all the added costs that you wouldn't have if you were working on site. So you're providing your own computer, your own headset, your own internet service, your own power, and so on and so forth. So I know a lot of colleagues are actually charging more for RSI because it's more taxing intellectually, and you're providing all of the hardware and software yourself.
Super, thanks. This is a sad question. Danielle, this might be up your alley. The idea of sharing instructions for the clients is great, but what happens when you as an interpreter don't have the authority to do so during the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, you're stuck.
I have interpreted to empty channels because of that, right? Like where it's absolutely clear there's no way for me to butt in. And I don't know what Kari went. I mean, over on the community side, it's like, people can't get on. They haven't understood. And unless they start making noise in the chat windows and someone pays attention to it, that's
why we said in the beginning, communication has been, or language access has been set back. When that's one of the worst ways possible, because there is no access. There's no access.
Yeah. So the clients are like, I checked the box. I provided language access, but they didn't actually let people get on the channel. So I don't know if Kari has comments for that as well. But I mean, I have been in that situation where I know I'm interpreting on an empty channel, and I haven't not had any way to interrupt or intervene.
And I would push whoever sent you, if it's not a direct contract hire, whoever, and even still, whoever sent you, you go back and give them that feedback and let them know what happened.
Yep.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you both. Is it possible to assign several language channels at different times, or shall all language channels be assigned at the same time?
Patty, you want to take that?
Yeah.
And I mean, depending on the platform, right? But and you're mute. There you go.
Sure. In general, on Zoom, all of the interpreters must be present for you to assign them. Our experience has been on Zoom that if somebody drops off after they've been assigned as an interpreter, if their internet cuts or what have you, and they come back, they are automatically reassigned as an interpreter. But you can't add interpreters while the function is actually operating on Zoom. If you are working on one of the other platforms, if there's a technician working in the background, it may be possible, but it will depend on those platforms and whether there is a tech specifically assigned to assist. Again, best practice, don't try to be the technician and the interpreter on your own event if you can possibly avoid it. Interpreters have enough to do without having to worry about the tech.
Amen. Is in the technical setup shown by Catherine and Danielle, is there a possibility of handling relay?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let Kari talk about relay. We didn't deal with it, but so you can, so relay gets really complicated unless even off of Zoom, you can do it, but you have to set it up with multiple phone bridges and multiple numbers to multiple participants if you're not using an RSI platform. Kari, do you want to talk about how relay handles on Zoom and on the dedicated platforms?
Sure. So the big difference between Zoom and the actual RSI platforms is that Zoom is really a video conferencing platform with a simultaneous feature added on. So Zoom does not offer relay inherent to it. There have been a lot of requests for it. The feedback that I understand has come back from the company is that allowing for relay on Zoom would require a complete change of their architecture, which of course is very unlikely to happen anytime in the near future. So for the time being, there is no automatic relay on Zoom as there are on all of the remote simultaneous interpreting platforms, the dedicated platforms. There are workarounds, but you need several devices. And it, again, it increases the cognitive load on the interpreter because you're dealing with more tech than you would be if you were just doing a bilingual event.
Thank you. A couple of questions have come up about legal liability. What type of legal liability, this is one of the questions, do we have as interpreters if we have to coordinate the platform and IT and meeting hosting duties, et cetera?
Is a different question than when we asked before.
If it's the same answer, we'll skip on because we have 3,000 questions.
Yeah. I mean, the only answer I would additionally give is that I carry, personal liability insurance. I think it's probably very untested ground out. I mean, I think this is something that's been really well hashed out in the conference interpreting arena that is not hashed out at all outside of that arena. So I suspect that we don't know the answer to that question and it's going to play out in court.
I would actually, just as a small business owner, echo that to all you freelance interpreters out there. You should have at a minimum liability insurance, potentially errors and omissions insurance. And if you're handling all this on top of it, please don't delay. So when the limited English proficient individual is on a cell phone with the interpreter and watching Zoom, sometimes you can hear an echo through Zoom. And the question is, how do you get rid of it?
Oh yeah, because you're hearing it through their phone.
And then,
yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, I Kata, do you want to take a stab, or because this is sort of that setup if you're on Google Meet and you have a phone bridge, but the parent's also logged in, and so you're getting the double sound. I mean, the only way that I could think of doing is that you'd have to have the parent be super diligent about muting when they're not talking. But they'd still be hearing the sound. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, Kati. Yeah.
The only solution is to ask them, as you suggested, to mute unless they're speaking on Zoom and to turn the volume on their device, whatever they're tuned into Zoom on, to tune that volume way down so that you don't get that loop back into the other platform. But it's always a challenge, along with background noise.
Yeah, the challenge or the response is echoed from even in the chat here too, from other folks who've experienced it.
Very interesting. This is quite the question. How are illiterate clients advised of the protocol in community interpreting? That's a very serious question.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, and what Catherine said is that there's a lot of work done by either the organizer to get a hold, because they know their community, to get a hold of that person so they can verbally explain. It's the visuals, having those resources available so that they can show the participant what they should be looking for.
Yeah. And I would say that probably the answer is they're not. And this is one of the things that that's been most distressing for me is the cratering of language access in general. These events are often only put out in English, even when interpreting is provided. There's not the same kind of outreach. The outreach that does happen is ineffective because you don't reach English speakers the same way you reach immigrant communities. And so I just see, like the best thing that I can see happening is that these things do end up on Facebook as recorded events that can be rewatched, even though that's super nerve-wracking for the interpreter, because at least people can find them through social media channels. But I think we don't have an answer. It will entirely depend on if that particular organization is being proactive and knows their community and is somehow trying to do that outreach. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question in just a sec. I just want to pause to comment that if I ask you something that you guys answered during the presentation, I apologize. Between monitoring chat with Andrew and monitoring Q&A on my own, I did miss a lot.
I only mentioned it because I was monitoring the chat and that question was asked in the chat too. So no, you're fine.
Well, it may still come up. Here's one for you specifically, Danielle. Why do you choose not to do live stream work?
I just don't like the pressure of having to provide an interpretation that's going to be accessible to the various different ASL users. And that's typically if you have a live streamed event, and at least in the sign language community, in my experience, is you're providing language access to people who use sign language in lots of different ways. And truly then it should be a CDI who's there. And then I'm
What's the CDI?
a certified deaf interpreter who has just a different skill set and access and use of sign language that is, it's just different than someone who's learned sign language not natively, because I'm not deaf. So here in Minnesota, we have Nick Zapko, who's been one of the fantastic CDIs working for all of the COVID announcements from Governor Walz. And that's someone who should be doing the live streaming events. So it's one, my own personal comfort level, and two, making space and advocating for the use of CDIs on something that's going to be live streamed or recorded for future use.
Terrific answer, thank you. Someone asked, do you know what the most secure RSI platform is? This person is aware that Zoom is more secure than before, but where are we? Which one is the most secure?
I do not know the answer to that question. Do you, Kadi, have a sense in terms of the secure from outside bombing? I guess, I don't know.
I do not. I think they sort of promote themselves as being relatively secure, but I don't know which has the best protocols. In any case, you know, these events, and especially if you're doing integration, so let's say your client wants to do something on Teams because they think it's more secure than the other platforms. But then if you add a layer of Ablio Conference, Interprefy, Kudo, whatever it is on top of it, that may affect their security level as well. So these are all things that have to be taken into consideration. And again, if something is being live streamed, then that's very different from something that is highly technical or, you know, proprietary, medical, so forth.
Okay.
And Margie, before you jump to the next question, I just wanted to acknowledge the comment that Mario Flores, who shared his great educational interpreting hacks with us. He's in the room, so it's great that he's here. But he wanted to reiterate that it is doable. You do build this expertise. You get used to it. It becomes more automatic and integrated. And I think Kadi might want to speak to that as well, that, you know, we all have many colleagues who are doing this every day, all day long, and, you know, and they figure it out and they figure out the balance, and it does become doable, but it does require an additional skill set that you have to learn. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Someone commented earlier too that, well, I'm glad I've tried RSI before this.
I know, exactly. They're not trying to discourage everybody.
No, but don't be overwhelmed when you start, because it's all uncharted territory. And so you have everyone, all of us on this webinar, and then of course in the chat, like the first time we do anything, it's always a bit of a train wreck as you try and figure out, what am I supposed to get but to echo Mario and to put that one person at ease. I promise it gets easier, and you just have to give yourself that space and grace and patience to figure it out and have buddies. So like if I were to have to start doing this more regularly, Catherine would be on speed dial. So, or Kati. So it really is just finding that village of people to help you. And COVID has made us all feel so isolated and lonely in our work. And the beautiful thing is that we're all in the same boat, and there's some who are in the front of the boat and are paving the way for us, and some of us who are trying to catch up, and you can totally do it.
Yeah, Kati's been one of those people for me.
Thank you, Catherine. You know, one thing you can do, in addition to, you know, call a friend, but you can also find a group of people. If you have a set of colleagues, all sort of pitch in and buy a month's worth of a Zoom license, of a webinar license, and just have host individual practice sessions. Just 2 interpreters, get on there, put up a YouTube conference in the background, and just practice the interpreting, practice the switchovers, practice going back and forth between the channels, and just practice until you're comfortable with it before you actually go live. It will cost, I think what is it, $15 a month for the basic and $40 for the subscription.
Yep.
So it's $55. And if you have 3 or 4 people that all chip in to, get their skills up to speed, it's not too onerous.
Right.
Great points. One more question before we let you amazing ladies go. What is your opinion? And we've actually had a couple of questions to this effect. What is your opinion about having the video on while interpreting? I've heard a lot of people appreciate having the video on.
As a sign language interpreter and a very expressive person, I love having video on.
Another moment.
So if I was a spoken language interpreter, I would have the video open. Ask anyone who works with me, I make them have video on. I like it.
I think I'll answer this and then Kati can answer this as well. I think it depends on that event type that we talked about before. If it's a webinar event, I don't want to be on screen, honestly, for simultaneous, because I am tracking so much. I don't even know what my face is looking like. I mean, it's a little bit different than consecutive. I just I don't even, for that, I'm not going to, I mean, the standard I think that's kind of developing that at least on a webinar, your camera's off and you're out of sight. You're not part of the presentation team. But if it's an interactive meeting, like with an IEP or, with some kind of small, 5 or 6 people all talking to each other, then I think it's going to depend. That would be my answer. It's going to depend on the needs of the meeting. And I'll see what Kati has to say.
Yeah, I think it does depend on needs, but for the most part in a remote simultaneous, as you said, Catherine, the interpreter is not a presenter. The interpreter is not a player in this.
Right.
And therefore the camera is off, and a lot of people even hide the view of the people who don't have their camera on, and therefore they can concentrate on the actual presenters. And we're in the background, just as we would be if we were on site in an interpreting booth. We would not be at the front of the room, we'd be at the back of the room. And by keeping your camera off, you're at the back of the room. The other reason is, as you quite rightly said, Catherine, you get in the zone and you're making faces. I was on an event with a colleague who was so focused, and he's like sticking his tongue out one way, sticking his tongue out the other, and he had left his camera on, and it was so distracting for the presenters and the participants on this meeting. Everybody was just, I mean, you could see from their faces that they were just chuckling at the faces that he was making. And it just wasn't fair to him. It was, his camera was left on by accident. So I am firmly in the camera off camp.
Right. Except for which, and you can see what we did, like what we showed before, when you're in that dynamic where there's like the service provider and the LEP person, and they're already disadvantaged because they're on the phone and all the rest of it. And you may be the one who has to really pause and say they're trying to talk. And, so it you got to feel it through again. Remember to boldly go where no one has gone before. We're establishing these best practices right now.
Yep.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Building the plane in flight.
Yep.
Exactly. Remember that one. It feels like the whole field of community interpreting, frankly. I hate to draw this to a close when there are 300,000 questions left, but to all of you, feel free to send urgent questions that were not answered to info@cultureandlanguage.net. We'll be happy to pass them on to the presenters. Meanwhile, thank you, Catherine, Danielle, Gabby, I don't know if any of you, how much time you had to even glance at the chat. It was so rich. It was so appreciative, even more than average. And we have very appreciative webinar attendees, but this is a topic, I think, just to hear the venting that went on shows how deeply, deeply appreciated all 3 of you were for sharing your expertise today. Boy, did I learn a lot as well. So while I personally will be happy to stay on and answer general questions about CCC, about our programs, about the webinar series, about certificates, about CUs or anything at all, I do want to liberate you after all the hard work you put into this. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was urgently needed across the whole field and across many specializations of interpreting. So hugely appreciated.
No,
We're a village. We have to help each other.
Thank you for providing this platform and for sharing it out for free. Yeah, it's huge. And thank you for connecting from Chile.
Yes, Gabby, that was above and beyond.
And we'll make sure
my pleasure.
We'll do a little happy dance once we know your internet's back up and running before tomorrow too.
Yeah, I need to get on that immediately. It happens.
Good luck with your travels.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for inviting me. It was a pleasure to join you, and I look forward to seeing the video so I can see everything I missed.
Wonderful. And everyone else, you will get it to tomorrow. You'll get, sorry, a link to the presentation and also to the PowerPoint. And thank you, ladies, for sharing the PowerPoint as well.
Yeah.